Chapter 12, Italy, Part 2. In February of 1831, Felix turned 22. The month was busy with festivities commencing in the city. Everywhere guards were parading and the drums were beating. The new pope had been elected. Felix walked in the commotion as crowds of people gathered in the streets, spectating the parades. It was loud with cheer. Felix found himself caught up in confetti throwing, causing him to turn about and bump into someone. "Aïe!" they exclaimed as they tripped. Felix helped the man up, switching his language to French. "Je suis vraiment désolé." "How do you know I speak French?" The man fixed his wispy strides of ash-brown hair. "Your coat appears to be a French tailoring, and your accent." "Oh," the ditzy man recollected. Felix concluded that the man was older than him by a few years. His choice in fashion made him appear younger in mindset. His clothes were nice, but his cravat was a messy knot. He looked as if he'd been out with friends all night. The man held out his hand. "My name is Hector Berlioz." "I'm Felix Mendelssohn." They shook hands. Berlioz nodded. "Ah, I have heard of you. You see, I studied music at the conservatory in Paris. I'm working on a career in composition. I'm getting along well with it." "I hope to hear your work." Felix smiled as they found a quiet path to converse. He continued, "You play a piano, I imagine?" "Well, not like most composers. I've had a few lessons here and there. I'm more fluent with guitar and other instruments. I didn't get much of a chance growing up to find my musical abilities. I loved it, but you see, my father sent me to university to study medicine." "That sounds tough. I've heard medical school is quite hard. That is, if you can stomach it." Felix felt queasy just thinking about it. Hector nodded. "That was my problem. I handled the schooling for a few years, but one day, when I was to visit the morgue with a classmate, I jumped out the window and ran away. I then got a chance to pursue music when I was accepted to be a student at the conservatory." "If you have the desire to make music, it's never too late," Felix commented. He then added, "I'd take music school over medical school any day." "You must be quite smart if you made it fine in other aspects of learning medicine." Berlioz shrugged. "You can do a lot just to please your father." And the schooling did have its benefits. His tone turned rather suspicious. Felix didn't think much of his oddness. They continued towards the main area of the city. There, with the election of the Pope, many events were happening, mostly concerning religion. Felix found the long occasions quite tiresome. The culture of Italy was different to him, but he spectated the various events. He did have personal interest in religion, complying to what his parents had brought he and his siblings up in. When traveling, his idea of the two most important items to obtain were a Bible and a piano. Hector perceived the occasions boring and uninteresting. He was indifferent when it came to religion. In the moment of standing in an open area, listening to speeches, he spotted a pastry shop nearby selling cannoli, so he decided to head that way. Felix followed as he wanted something sweet to eat. The shop smelled divine upon entering. There were a few small round tables for seating, and the decor made the shop quaint and clean. At the main counter, the pastries on display included gelato, chocolate, and sparkling drinks. Both Hector and Felix were set on getting cannoli and coffee. After purchasing a few rolls of the creamy treat, they sat down to visit. Hector had many questions for Felix concerning composition. Most of what he learned had been from textbooks, but he knew it was important to consult other fellow musicians. Felix, in his usual way, spoke much about Bach, Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven. Hector nodded at all of the information, but after Felix spoke his heart out, Hector questioned, "I see you do like old composers, but what about anything current, new? Music needs to be pushed forward." "Well, yeah, but I think for new music to sound good, it needs influencing. Not completely from scratch. Some rules must be set." "I think you study the music of dead composers too closely." "But I love it." Felix took a bite of cannoli. He flinched upon doing so. Hector noticed. "I think you need to go to the barber. An aching tooth might mean it's infected." 9. It's fine. I just washed them. I've been making sure to. But if it's already infected, you must get it out. Let me see it," Hector demanded. Felix opened his mouth and pointed to the one that ached. Hector scolded, "If you don't go to the barber now, I will pull it out." "You aren't a barber. I'm not getting it pulled." "Trust me, I went to medical school. I may not have finished, but I know an infected tooth when I see one." "Well, I'm not getting it pulled right now. I have too much that I want to see today." Felix crossed his arms. Hector gave a hard response. "If you put it off, you won't be around to sightsee anything. Besides, there's a barber just down the street." Oh, how convenient. Felix felt anxious as he couldn't argue. The two finished their pastries, then headed out the door. When entering the sidewalk, Felix began walking the opposite way to the barber. Hector turned him around. "It's this way." "Oh." Felix followed him in reluctance. He felt as if he were walking to a scaffold, as he knew getting a tooth pulled wasn't at all pleasant. They came to a small brick building with the blue, red, and white ribboned pole indicating the barber shop. Barbers mostly shaved and cut hair, but some were also skilled dentists. "Are you sure a barber would really know what they are doing? Can't we find a doctor or someone who specializes in teeth?" Felix stopped before opening the door. Hector laughed. "Who else is there besides a barber? That would be quite silly for someone to go to school just for teeth." He nudged Felix to go in. Upon entering the small shop, the barber was busy giving a man a haircut. When he saw more customers come in, he pointed to 2 chairs in the waiting area. Felix nervously sat and Hector took the other chair, picking up a newspaper. Felix watched as the barber worked, making sure he acted nice. The man seemed kind as he chatted with the current customer he was cutting hair for. Hector noticed Felix gawking about in a fright, so suggested, "You should read something to calm down. It's a quick tooth pull that shan't hurt for long." Felix took advice and happened upon a Bible to comfort him. He began reading it with deep interest. Hector noticed his choice of book. "You don't really read that, do you?" "I find it the utmost importance of reading," Felix told him, his voice shaking. "It's an outdated, silly old book, full of stories. Why bother with it?" Berlioz stated, crossing his arms. Felix's voice became blunt and serious. "Hector, please, don't make fun of it. It is a truthful book. It has practical advice, even if you disagree." "Advice is what?" "There's much to read upon being practical, decent, and kind. How to have happiness in life. Managing work and money responsibly. There's so much. You should read it." Felix encouraged in brightness. Berlioz shrugged and rolled his eyes. "All right, who's next?" the barber called. Felix's enlightenment faded. He stood nervously, declaring to the barber, "My tooth is aching." "Sit here and I'll take a look." He patted the seat. Felix sat in the rather uncomfortable barber's chair. It felt sturdy and stiff. The barber organized a few utensils to clean his teeth, such as floss and dental powder. He set a candle on the stand for extra light. It still rendered the room a tinge dim. The barber gently tilted his head back to examine his teeth. Felix reclined the best he could, but the chair was completely unsuitable for dentistry. He still had his doubts as to how qualified this man was to be prodding at his teeth. "An upper molar in the back is pretty bad," the barber informed. "I'll get it out." He rummaged a drawer nearby. The contents of the drawer had nothing but sharp and unpleasant things. It made Felix's stomach churn. He tried to dissuade the barber. "Are you sure that's the only solution? Can't I get a filling? I'd be pleased with that." "I'm sorry, but a filling won't fix the problem." He set a tooth key on the stand beside the chair. Felix near jumped at the sight of it. He questioned in a tremble, "It will be painless, right?" The barber grabbed a bottle of brandy from a cabinet, not answering the question. "Drink a few gulps of this. Be sure to wash it in your mouth." All right, Felix felt a bit more at ease with the refreshments offered. He drank a fair share. The barber then grabbed a cloth and soaked it in some dental powder. "Right now I'm going to clean your teeth." "Okay," Felix opened his mouth, but in unsureness. The barber carefully began scrubbing his teeth, trying to ease his nerves. Felix felt calmer, but had a feeling that the barber was distracting him from something else. Each time he wanted to sit normally, the barber instructed while keeping his head tilted back. "Don't move, I'm still cleaning your teeth." Felix cooperated as the salty cleaner soothed his aching tooth. It felt nice to get a thorough cleaning. The barber then sighed while grabbing the tooth key. "This is the hardest part of my job." Wait, Felix refrained as the barber held the wretched thing towards his mouth. In a nervous smother, he went to stand, but realized he couldn't. His arms had been strapped against the armrest, trapping him in the chair. The barber had done it in the time of distracting him. In a frantic panic, Felix tugged at the restraints. This isn't human. You shouldn't treat your patients like this. I'm sorry, but you don't seem the sort to keep still, and this must get done. The barber tightened him to the chair further by strapping his body. Felix struggled. This is too tight. You're hurting me. Calm down. You're all right. The barber continued tightening him to be sure he couldn't move. Nine, Felix yelped as the barber forcefully shoved the tooth key in his mouth. When the metal bashed against the aching tooth, tears streamed down Felix's face. The barber sighed. This would take one try, or two. He began prying at the infected tooth. Ouch, ouch. Felix snapped at the barber, trying to bite him. The barber in frustration gripped his jaw tighter to keep him still. Felix grimaced as the rather rusty old thing was forced towards the back of his mouth. The barber tried to assure, just keep still. Please, Nine. Felix was interrupted as the barber began forcefully prying. In the midst of screaming and wailing, the barber struggled to get a good hold on the tooth. Felix wasn't helping as he, in another nervous smother, managed to bite his finger, causing the barber to back away and yell, Ouch, I can't do this, you are far too difficult. The barber, now overly frustrated, threw the tooth key down on the stand. Hector set down the newspaper. I'll do it. Before Felix could make any complaints, Hector in a flash grabbed the tooth key. He pried at the tooth as if he had been trained in such a field. It didn't make the procedure any less painful. Felix couldn't discern if this was a helpful gesture or a torture. He deemed it the latter. After many heart-wrenching moments, Felix didn't think he could bear the pain any longer. A split second after the flick of the wrist, the tooth toppled to the floor. It wasn't that hard. Hector stood by Felix outside the barber shop. Felix held a handkerchief in his mouth while sitting on a bench, looking like the most miserable man in the country. His mouth and jaw ached horribly. Hector mentioned, I've seen a few tooth extractions in my schooling years. It's quite the hash. You only screamed a little. I preferred the toothache over this pain, Felix stated with watering eyes. Hector sighed. Well, it had to get done. If you would have left it, over time, the infection would have killed you. Maybe you'll now remember to keep your teeth in check when traveling. I will. Felix chewed at the handkerchief, trying to soothe his mouth. They both carried on down the pavement to see what else was happening in town. Hector mentioned, I wonder if the carnival festivities will still commence tomorrow, as there is much happening religious-wise. I don't know. I guess we shall find out tomorrow. I'll be walking around the Colosseum if you'd like to join, Hector offered. Felix debated. I don't know. I've been around you a day, and already I've had a tooth pulled. I promise you won't be going to the barber again, he said. Felix nodded. All right, I shall join you. I should be in better shape tomorrow. I'm very tired right now. Hector stopped the carriage passing by and paid the cab to take Felix to his apartment. Felix thanked Berlioz, and they went their separate ways for the day. The next day there was a dusting of snow on the ground. Felix felt the need to treat himself after enduring the day before. He wore his favorite outfit with the blue coat when going out. His mouth ached still, so he kept a handkerchief at hand to chew at. The chill didn't seem to stop any locals from their daily walks and business. Felix took a carriage headed for the Colosseum to meet with Hector again. The festivities of Carnival seemed rather quiet. Yet as the carriage turned a corner to a center street, the confetti flew. It went everywhere, and people wore their decorative masks as well. In the midst of the confetti, people and other carriages, Felix was pelted in an array of sugar comfits. The powdered sugar covered his coat. He looked up to see some young ladies throwing them at him from a balcony. Felix had seen their faces before, at gatherings and balls. As the carriage drove on, another familiar lady threw powdered candy as well. Felix grabbed a handful of confetti and threw back. The second he started throwing, many acquaintances noticed him. Confetti and bonbons were tossed like snowballs. Felix's coat became as white as that of a miller. Before the carriage exited the busy road, a masked woman threw Felix a bundle of flowers. The carriage carried on through the bustling street and stopped at the Colosseum. Felix spotted Hector. Hector turned to him and asked in confusion, What happened to you? The carnival is pretty wild down the street. Felix brushed the powdered sugar from his coat. He and Hector then began walking about. Hector asked Felix, So in your travels, are you going to stop in Paris by chance? Yeah, my plan after Italy is to take a pedestrian excursion through Switzerland. Then I must get to Munich to have my music performed there. Then I'll be in Paris. I was thinking, when you get to Paris, we could meet again. I'll be back there by the time you come, as I am leaving tomorrow morning. Some of my music will be performed, and I would like you to come. I definitely will, Felix accepted. Hector thought his new friend's opinion would be ever so important. Felix then mentioned, I'm going to be leaving Rome soon and headed to Naples as my journey must continue. So I guess we won't meet again until I get to Paris. Felix shook Berlioz's hand. They went their separate ways after strolling a few hours. Back at Felix's apartment, he still had his bouquet of flowers the masked woman had given him. He worked on drying the flowers so he could keep them and show them to his siblings. His rooms were calm and away from the commotion near the city center. He spent the remainder of the day at the piano, working on the Italian Symphony and music for Goethe's poem Walpurgis Night. Felix was going to miss composing at the fine piano in the stylish apartment, but he needed to move on. There were still so many places to go and sights to see. In April of 1831, Felix caught up on letter writing in his new abode in Naples. It was much calmer than the hustle and festivities of Rome. Yet the weather was much more dreary. Even so, the peaceful surroundings inclined Felix to write letters, sketch, and compose in detail. He got to take a side excursion to the ruins of Pompeii, but found the ruins a melancholy affair. It appeared completely burnt and deserted. As he recollected on the ancient tragedy, many English and French ladies frolicked about, sketching and painting the old city. Some sights were a challenge to enjoy. As Felix strolled along the seashore, gazing at the distant islands, someone tapped on his shoulder. Felix turned to see an old, white-haired man. He looked crippled and hungry. Feeling pity, Felix gave the beggar a few suzuki to send him on his way. Yet as soon as the man went off, Felix was surrounded by a group of beggars. It ruined his stroll, as he was forced to finish his sightseeing of the ocean. Each one tugged at his coat and followed him. Some of them were children, rattling their jaws and crying, "Muoio di fame." Felix felt terrible, but he couldn't pander to each of their needs, as there were so many. At the same time, he knew only a few were actually in need. A carriage happened to be nearby, so Felix took it back to his rooms. The days in Naples began to tire him. He was living healthier, as he went to bed at 9 to wake at 5. Yet at the same time he was lazier, taking a siesta during the day, on top of the hearty amount of sleep. The laying about sent him into thoughts of the friends and family he ever so missed. The sound of a full orchestra begged to be listened to, as he had not heard one in such a long time. There were orchestras in Italy, but not well-rounded ones. The choirs fared the same. He wrote to Zeltzer of such. The voices were never together, and they seemed to battle each other in song. The holy music was sung in complete dullness, with bad tone. Felix was not impressed with the Italian choirs. He missed his London friends, ever so as they could play and test out his freshly composed music with ease. Felix debated leaving Naples for Sicily, but Abraham sent letters discouraging that choice. Felix complied to his father's wishes, but with much reluctance. Instead, he decided to return to Rome. He couldn't help but get a taste of the city once more before leaving Italy. On his way there, he happened upon some friends heading to Ischia. It was a place near Rome full of beautiful scenery. Felix wanted to join and paid the coachman to take his luggage back to his rooms in Rome. He only grabbed a small knapsack of 3 shirts and some poems of Goethe for the side excursion. His friends on the trip were Ed Benjamin, Theodor Hildebrandt, and Carlson. Felix joined their carriage. The whole way to Ischia was nothing but beggars. When there weren't any, the carriage parked and the group hiked around the lake and hills. The landscape inclined Felix to draw. He also read Goethe's poems as to take in the meaning whilst wandering the forests. In their stay in Ischia, they breakfasted on fruit, and in the evenings dined on fish. The trip lasted a few days before heading back to civilization. Upon returning to his apartment in Rome from the little side excursion, Felix received more family letters. Paul had sent a letter. It intrigued Felix, as his young brother was becoming dignified. He was making arrangements to travel to London. Felix felt such pride as Paul was getting out on his own. At the same time, it made Felix miss that smoky nest called London. He missed his friends of Britain. The concert-goers of England had not yet forgotten Felix's name, as some newspapers noted. Felix couldn't wait to hear a good Philharmonia again. After spending a few days and getting his last taste of the grand Italian city, Felix made the decision to fully end his stay in Rome. He needed to move on with his journey. The next city on the way out was Florence. The route out of Rome was beautiful, but the horrid Vetturino once again stopped at horrid inns that starved him. Felix had enough of it, as they made it a half a day's journey from Florence. As the horses steadily walked along the dirt path, nearing the next village, Felix yelled at the coachman, "Stop the carriage now." As soon as the carriage halted, Felix jumped out and grabbed his luggage in an angered mood. The Vetturino rolled his eyes at Felix, thinking him to be acting as such a child. Yet Felix was tired and hungry, rendering him to be moody. After grabbing his luggage, Felix hissed at the insolent Vetturino, "Drive to the devil." The man hurried off gladly. Felix went on by foot to the village ahead. It was called Incia. The summer day was hot, so Felix was sweating and thirsty by the time he reached town. A carriage house stood as one of the first buildings to see when walking into the village. He went straight there, as he intended to get a better ride to Florence. Upon entering, a landlady was tending to some sweeping. Some stable boys were at work as well. Felix in tiredness set his luggage down. The hard-at-work, middle-aged landlady turned when hearing him enter. She fetched him some water and acted with kindness. "Grazie," Felix gulped down the fresh water. He then spoke business. "I need a carriage to Florence. I must be there by evening." "I can get you a decent carriage." The landlady spoke decent English. Felix offered his price, but she requested 4 times as much. Felix refused such an offer, as it was cheating. The landlady then said, now speaking fast Italian, "You'll have to find a carriage elsewhere." Felix caught her words, as his Italian had been improving, but knew she was trying to confuse him. Felix huffed and walked out to find other means of a carriage. He went to a few inns, but only found offers on post horses, not suitable for luggage. It forced him to return to the carriage house. This time he demanded the landlady, "I want horses at a fair price." "You take my offer or leave." She swept the floor harshly. Felix crossed his arms. "I want to see the regulations." He knew in such matters they were supposed to have them. "I don't have time to show you them." She snorted and raised the broomstick at him. "Leave, or I shall make you." Felix stepped towards the door as the stable boys eyed the commotion. The landlady turned her back on him, continuing her sweeping near a door that led to another room. Felix, in a sudden fit of rage, stormed towards the woman and seized her. She in an instant bashed him in the gut with the broom's handle. Felix gasped as it winded him, but he managed to push her in the room nearby. The woman yelled, but Felix shut the door on her. He felt regret, as he knew his anger caused him to be harsh, but she was on such disagreeable terms. When turning away from the door, a group of stable boys gathered together, forming a mob. Each one had their fists clenched. As Felix froze, the landlady opened the door, clenching her broom in pure fire. She ordered the stable boys, "Get him." Felix sprinted off, carrying his luggage as the boys were at his heels. They yelled and cursed at him. Felix glanced at each house, trying to find the postera, yet in reality no such person was in town. They lived 4 miles off. Felix was fit athletically as a runner, but he was slowed. Though he had hurt his leg in the carriage crash a year prior, it was weak when strained. He knew he should have worked more on strengthening it, but had been busy and didn't think much of it after it was deemed healed. One of the stable boys noticed Felix slowed with each step. It made the boy only sprint faster, knowing he could catch him. In the moment of running in the middle of the street, Felix could only go so far. He didn't know where to turn. As he frantically turned about, one of the adolescents managed to pull him backwards. Felix dropped down with his luggage, making a mess of it. The other boys caught up and surrounded him. Their fists were raised. Felix shut his eyes tightly and braced himself for their throttles. After a few moments of nothing, he opened them again. A well-dressed gentleman that had walked into the scene distracted the boys' attention and their respect. The man instructed the adolescents, "Leave him be. I am sure whatever he has done can be made up in better ways." The boys listened to the man. Felix felt much relief after such an affair. He picked up his luggage and stood by the respected man. The boys warned the gentleman, "That man is mad. He is not right. He's crazy." The man ignored their warnings and turned to Felix. What happened? He was genuine with concern. Felix explained everything involving the landlady and the prices. The man nodded. "Come with me." He led Felix to a vine dresser. There he had a little carriage for hire and at a fair price. The stable boys followed Felix as if to find a chance to take him back, but their respect for the kind gentleman rendered them to only continue their warnings. They pressed into the building. Felix kept beside the respected man who understood his situation. In the whole matter, the carriage came and Felix was on his way to Florence. The sun was quite bright, so Felix opened an umbrella to get some shade. The carriage ride was deemed far better than the one before. The coachman drove quickly, but still mild enough so Felix could enjoy the scenery. When the carriage entered the streets of Florence, Felix felt such relief to see the large cathedral with the famous domed roof. He expected to gain much insight at the museums and galleries, seeing the sculptures by Michelangelo and the paintings by Leonardo da Vinci. After finding rooms, he seeked out somewhere to eat, as the hassle of the day took up the lunch hour. As he walked, there were grand sculptures outside museums to see in the dim sunset, giving a sense of beauty of its own. Felix treated himself to a fine dinner in a beautiful restaurant. The building was old, but still beautiful, with Renaissance art and carved wood decorating the door frames. He dined on real Italian pizza, and for once was not cheated by the waiter on price. He picked up better Italian speech within his stay. After eating, he went home and got good rest. The entirety of the next day was spent roaming the art galleries. Felix, being an admirer of art, found it almost surreal to see the famous paintings and statues depicted in his study books. It gave him much inspiration and the strive to draw and paint. It influenced his musical ear as well, as the beauty of it burst with song. The journey through Italy was nearing the end with each day. The final city Felix found stay in was Milan. Much happened there, though. The carriage ride was entertaining as he read an episode of Almadia, surrounded by a group of Italian actors singing Rossini's Ma Trema Trema. Upon arriving to Milan, all he could ponder over musically was Beethoven's A major sonata, in which was dedicated to Madame Dorothea von Ertmann. She lived in Milan as her husband was an Austrian general stationed there. She could have been the one Beethoven intended in his love letter, in which he titled the recipient his immortal beloved. Felix strived to find her, as anything involving Beethoven took his interests. After asking a few locals, he found the grand home of General Ertmann. Before walking up to it, he penned a few pretty speeches as to address Madame Ertmann in good manner. He wore a nice black coat over his well-chosen outfit, completing a proper greeting. When walking up to the gate, what appeared to be a watchman stood nearby. Felix asked him, "Is by chance General Ertmann around? I wish to speak to him." "You are speaking to him," the old man confessed. Felix felt some surprise, but conducted himself. "I am a musician, and heard that Madame Ertmann played Beethoven's music well. I wish to hear some." "You like Beethoven? She is inside. You seem a nice gentleman. It is so hard to find one who loves the music of Beethoven around here. My wife would love to have you come in. She doesn't play piano much anymore, though I'm afraid." He gestured to Felix to follow him. They entered the gate. The yard and flower gardens felt so regal and open. The sound of the piano could already be heard upon nearing the front doors. General Ertmann showed surprise with a few tears, as he had not heard his wife play music in a long time. A room down the hall near the doors sat a fine lady, playing the keys of a Mozart sonata. She halted as she heard footsteps walk in the music room. "Darling, I've happened upon a gentleman. He plays Beethoven's music," General Ertmann inquired. Madame Ertmann turned around in her seat and smiled kindly. Felix smiled back, holding his music folder. The kindly-faced old woman gestured to him to set the music at the piano. He did, and she then patted a spot beside her on the piano bench. Felix sat, feeling quite shy, as they welcomed him easier than anticipated. They were of quite high a station in society, so he didn't know what to expect. He felt more at ease as they shuffled through some music, speaking of the well-crafted music Beethoven composed. Felix spoke his proper speeches, as well as to assure her that he was an educated man. After playing through various works for an hour or so, Madame Ertmann couldn't help but find much intrigue in Felix, as he was young to know Beethoven's music so well. She shared her stories of meeting Beethoven and his reasoning on dedicating a sonata to her. One story was quite touching, as she suddenly explained that years back when her young son died, Beethoven invited her over and improvised at the piano for an hour to comfort her, saying they would be speaking to each other in tones. Felix enjoyed her piano skills as she knew the techniques of a good, rounded sound. Some passages she played too quickly, though, but it gave character. She enjoyed Felix's music as the creativity of the composer gave her the reminiscences of taking lessons from Beethoven those years ago. Of course, Felix was different from Beethoven, but they were both creative and played piano with complete passion and talent. Madame Ertmann had longed for such delicate improvising at the keys as Felix accomplished. The Ertmanns invited him to come back. Felix spent the next few days paying visits to their home. Though the company was well in Milan, Felix had trouble keeping himself groomed during his stay. He managed, but it was a challenge. The trouble lied with the lodgings. It was settled in a desolate part of town. He had been stuck with it as the other lodgings were taken. The walls were thin. He could scarcely sleep as stormy weather woke him in the night. It rendered him looking tired. The other trouble was that fleas were prevalent on the bed and around the rooms. They kept him awake as they had a nasty bite. Felix carried on his days in Milan as he became acquainted with another person of utmost importance to him. Madame Ertmann sent him an invitation to dinner and an evening of music. Felix, of course, was obliged and came accordingly. Other guests had been invited as well. One caught Felix's attention. He had dark hair, but his face had a slight familiarity. At the same time, he knew he'd never met this man. He was older than Felix by some years, around Ignaz's age. As everyone entered the dining room, Madame Ertmann encouraged Felix. "Why don't you sit by Karl? I bet you'd like to be in his company." She gestured to the man that puzzled Felix's mind. His mind was not puzzled any more, as everything clicked by hearing his name. This man was Karl Mozart, the eldest of Wolfgang's two sons. Felix became overly excited, but only on the inside as he needed to keep composure. Karl noticed his spark of enthusiasm, though. He held out his hand kindly for Felix to shake. After such a greeting, they gladly sat by each other. Felix learned much by conversation with Herr Mozart. Karl told him of his residence and occupation in Milan, which gave Felix relief that he had stopped in this city. He noticed how much Karl looked like his father, as he had seen paintings of Wolfgang. His way of speech was so much like Wolfgang's manner in letter writing and such. He also had a well-trained ear for composition. His manner of talking about music showed he was very much a true Mozart. He confessed in humbleness, "I do some music when my regular job gives the time. My younger brother, Franz Xavier, is the one who got the aspiration to compose." "You surely have some of your father's gifts. I can tell from your speech and passion for music," Felix assured. Karl smiled at his kindness. After dinner, the guests went to hear music. A few had talent at the keys and filled the room with the well-tuned instrument. To Felix's surprise, no one played any Mozart. Beethoven was the main choice. He figured Karl didn't want to be in the shadow of his father. Yet a baroness whispered to Felix, "You better play something of Mozart's, or his son would be quite mortified." Felix went to the piano, and at first felt shy of playing a Mozart piece in front of Karl. Yet he carried on with the overture of Don Juan. After it, Karl came up to the piano. His expression looked breathless. Felix wondered if he made a mistake in choosing the piece. Yet Karl suddenly burst into enthusiasm. "Please play the overture to Flacico Magico of my Vater." Felix complied with relief and played it through. Karl nearly hopped with happiness in hearing his father's music. It was as if he were back home in the apartment in Vienna, hearing Wolfgang play in his usual cheeriness of laughs. Felix couldn't help but smile at Karl. The next day, Karl invited Felix to accompany him to visit a group of friends at a home near the Lake of Como. On the way, Karl told Felix many stories of his childhood. One fun story was of how he and his brother would irritate their father by sitting at his piano, playing incomplete scales, as Wolfgang was busy in the other room. The sound of the incompleteness prompted their father to rush into the room and finish the lines. Felix laughed at such an interesting fact. They soon arrived at a humble abode that had a decent view of the lake. When they entered the home, Felix found that the company were locals from the city. There was a doctor, the apothecary, the judge, and others as such. They all stayed a few days, spending time visiting about art and plays. There was a lively discussion of the French writer George Sand. They admired the man's books. The plays of Shakespeare were then talked of. Felix enjoyed how they loved the works, but then the doctor stated, "Some of Shakespeare's plays are rather a childish affair." "Really?" Felix asked. "Whatever ones do you mean?" "A prime example is that waste of a reed I say to you is A Midsummer Night's Dream. So childish, with the fairies and things." "Oh." Felix trailed off his speech. He wanted so badly to say it was a wonderful play, and he wrote music for it, but didn't want to be laughed at, so he stayed silent. He regretted doing so. The rest of the stay at the house consisted of sketching, bathing in the lake, and taking a rowboat around. Yet the plan of rowing was shortened as a dark canopy of clouds hovered over. After returning to Milan, days later, Edward de Vriend wrote to Felix, wishing him to write an opera. Thinking it foolish he hadn't written more. Felix wrote back that he had a libretto in his hands soon to be done, and planned to accomplish one. It was rather an excuse, though, as he told him of all the other things he was writing. In truth, he was indecisive of the opera libretto. After writing, he packed up and took a coach headed for Switzerland. The leave of Italy saddened him, but at least it helped him think up good music.